Good morning to all of your different times around the planet. And it's lovely to begin listening to Micheál. Normally, we're standing together on a rain-swept Irish mountainside, usually near some monastic ruins, while he's singing and I recite. So, but it's lovely to hear him coming from the west of Ireland. We haven't been able to be together for so long. And it's interesting that you talk about names. My mother was within a hair's breadth of calling me Seamus, but it wouldn't have gone down very well in the north of England, where my Irish mother had moved to. Also, I'm very relieved because I would have been in competition with one of the greatest of our contemporary poets who just passed away, Seamus Heaney. And I wanted to begin with a radical little poem of his, actually, a poem that will take you out to the west of Ireland, to County Clare, just a little bit north of where Micheál was singing and reciting. And this poem embodies a lot of what the word radical is about. To my mind, the word radical is one of those beautiful conversational words in that it holds two poles in a very powerful way. It comes from radix in Latin, meaning root, of course. So it's a very conservative word in the sense that to be radical is to go back to your first principles, to go back to the foundational conversation that you were made for. And there's an invitation to a kind of radical simplicity in that, to drop away from the surface conversation down to this other place that you intuit and know and have had experience of, that lies inside you and from which you can step off into your new life. The other side of radical is its edgy conversational nature. A radical in the biological world is a molecule which has got free electrons, either negative or positive. So it's a molecule that's out for trouble, actually. It'll either be really good for your system or it'll be really bad. But it is ready to meet something else and create a different compound. Yeah. So we have our radical conversational edge too. Radical in the biological world too, which was my science, is the edge of the leading edge of the root that is finding its way through the soil structure into the ground, looking for nourishment and thirst. So implicitly, it's that part of us that is always trying, you could say, to drink from a deeper well, to look to a further horizon at the same time. Yeah. So this is a piece by Seamus Heaney called Postscript, simply called Postscript because it was the last poem he wrote in the collection, just almost as an afterthought. And he's taking you to this place that Micheál and I know very well, actually, called the Flaggy Shore. And it's a lovely set of limestone flags that have been laid naturally, by the processes of geological time on the southern end of Galway Bay. And in the morning, you can walk along there with the sun behind you towards the far end of Galway Bay. Or in the evening, you can walk with the sun going down, as in the words of the immortal Irish song, with the sun going down over Galway Bay. So it can be a very calm place to go, to find yourself, to remember what you're about, to go for a walk with the loved one or with your dog. But it can also be a really, really wild place at the same time. It's a radical place in October or November when the storms are coming in. The hurricanes that have formed in the Caribbean, swept through Florida or the Carolinas, gone out to sea again across the Atlantic, and then come in over the Irish coast, And this is Heaney arriving at this place, having driven out from Dublin. And if you've ever driven out to the west of Ireland from Dublin, you always feel as if you're taking off this heavy cloak and there's this wilder conversation, this horizon that you're heading towards. So this is Heaney's Postscript. He says, "Sometime take the time to drive out west into County Clare along the flaggy shore in September or October, when the wind and the light are working off each other. So that on one side, the ocean is alive with foam and glitter, while inland among stones, the surface of a slate grey lake is lit by the earthed lightning of a flock of swans, their feathers rough and roughening, white on white, their fully grown, headstrong looking heads tucked or crested or busy underwater. Useless to think you'll park and capture it more thoroughly. Useless to think you'll park and capture it more thoroughly. You are neither here nor there, a hurry through which strange unknown things pass, as big soft buffetings come at the car sideways and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. You are neither here nor there, a hurry through which strange and known things pass, as big soft buffetings come at the car sideways and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. This is like most Heaney poems, it's got a very, very physical image in the poem, which is a very common one in Ireland. When you go on holiday or you're trying to have a good time in the west of Ireland, you'll often be sat by the water in your car with the rain and the wind beating against the windscreen, wondering whether you should get out or not and get drenched, you know. So there's this whole sense of enclosure that human beings naturally have, you know, the sense that I'm in here, but actually I should be getting out and somehow meeting the world, and I'm not, yeah. And then this other very physical image of cracking the car door in a high wind, which all of us have had at one time or another. And the feeling of the whole power of the breeze getting behind that flag of metal and almost pulling us out of the car. And in many ways, what Heaney is saying is, you know, you don't do the work of transformation yourself. If you want radical transformation, you go to an edge where the elements are moving, where the radicality of the world, what's available in that alchemical sense I spoke about, you know, amongst molecules, ready for a conversation with something other than itself. All you do is go to that place and you crack the door of your heart just a shade and you let the wind get behind it, you know. And that's where the change happens. Sometime, take the time to drive out west into County Clare, along the flaggy shore in September or October, when the wind and the light are working off each other. So that on one side, the ocean is alive with foam and glitter, while inland among stones, the surface of a slate grey lake is lit by the earth lightning of a flock of swans. If you go to the flaggy shore, you'll see this little slate grey lake and you'll see the swans there. This is a very, very physical picture of a very, very familiar place to me at least, yeah. The earth lightning of a flock of swans, their feathers white on white, their fully grown, headstrong looking heads tucked or crested or busy underwater. Useless to think you'll park and capture it more thoroughly. You are neither here nor there, a hurry through which strange and known things pass, as big soft buffetings come at the car sideways and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. You are neither here nor there. This is the crux of the poem. A hurry through which strange and known things pass. You know, in the Zen tradition, there are all of these invitational questions. They're called koans, K-O-A-N. I worked within the Zen tradition for many years, actually, pretending to be Japanese, which was very useful. And but the questions are these eternal invitations into what I call the conversational nature of reality, yeah, where you don't get stuck in one side of the conservative radical, which is just rooted. Neither do you get stuck in in the elemental changes that are constantly occurring around you, but you seat your identity in the conversation between the two. Yeah. You're neither here nor there. You're neither that foundation nor the horizon to which you go. You are the conversation between them. And a lot of the teaching of the Zen teachers is checking you to see whether you've got stuck in one or the other, or whether your elemental conversational identity is still alive and you're still there. Yeah. This is a piece I wrote for a good friend of mine who passed away the height of his powers, John O'Donoghue. He wrote a very famous book on the Celtic world. We're very close friends for many years. Just over the back from the farmhouse in which he grew, not far from the Flaggy Shore, is a place called Cahir and Adurish. We've got a good Irish theme going here today. And Cahir and Adurish means the fort of the high door in Irish, the fort of the high door. And it's remarkably accurate, actually, because when you're looking up at Cahir and Adurish, which is a ridge line, you're often looking from this little valley where this boreen, this small road, goes from your feet up to the top of the ridge. And there are two stone walls on either side of this lane, this boreen, and they merge in perfect Italian Renaissance perspective right at the top, right in the ridge line where the bright light is over the top of the limestone mountain. But they don't quite meet because there's a little door of light between the two walls. And often when I'm walking up there, and most of the time I go up there, I'm there by myself. I often think I can walk straight up that road, straight through that door of light, and straight off into the thin air of my waiting life. And there's a whole kind of physical relationship between your feet on the ground and the way you're just about to step off into the living air of a surprising conversation that's waiting for you in the next youthful epoch of your beckoning existence. Yeah. So I wrote this for the road, for Cahir and Adurish and my experience. I wrote it for John also, who was always, in a sense, asking you to go beyond yourself. Yeah. So this is called Just Beyond Yourself. Yeah. Just beyond yourself. Just beyond yourself. It's where you need to be. Just beyond yourself. It's where you need to be. Half a step into self-forgetting and the rest restored by what you'll meet. Just beyond yourself. Just beyond yourself. It's where you need to be. Half a step into self-forgetting and the rest restored by what you'll meet. There's a road always beckoning. There's a road always beckoning. There's a road always beckoning. When you see the two sides of it closing together at that far horizon and deep in the foundations of your own heart at exactly the same time, that's how you know it's where you have to go. That's how you know it's the road you have to follow. That's how you know it's just beyond yourself. It's where you need to be. Just beyond yourself. It's where you need to be. Half a step into self-forgetting and the rest restored by what you'll meet. I always say life's quite merciful, actually. We set ourselves Herculean tasks, but you really only just need half a step into your life. You don't need to be an Olympic athlete. All you've got to do is move the conversation along a tiny bit, and the world will move it along with you. Sometimes you don't even have to move the conversation. All you've got to do is make yourself ready for the conversation. Like Hamlet said at the culmination of the play, the readiness is all. That's the absolute culmination of the play. The readiness is all here. Are you paying attention to what could be calling you? Are you Are you seeing, hearing, or conversing with anything that is other than yourself? There's a lovely line by a mystic called Terence Gray in the 30s. He says, "Why are you unhappy?" And you can relax. He's a poet. He'll answer it for you. He says, "Why are you unhappy?" He says, "Because 98.98% of everything that you do and all that you say is for yourself. And there isn't one." 98.98% of everything you say and all that you do is for yourself. And there isn't one. Well, what does he mean? He means there isn't a self that will survive meeting anything other than itself. The self that gets married is not the self who prospers in a conversation in the kitchen many years later. It's a totally different self. The mother or father anticipating a birth is not the person who's there 7 years later or 15 years later or 21 years later, having gone through the exigencies and trials of being a mother, trying to be a mother or a good father. And I often think that one of the necessary spiritual disciplines of the true pilgrim is to have a good sense of humor about yourself. Whatever context you've arranged for yourself, there will always be another context that makes your context absurd. Whatever you think might be a heartbreak at the beginning of your road, you later may find it was actually a stepping stone. And it was an invitation into a foundation of compassion for others who have had the same form of suffering, or what initially seemed like suffering, as you did. So I'll finish with this piece, and this is a little longer piece. I'm taking you from the west of Ireland now to a very famous pilgrimage route in the north of Europe called the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. For 1,000 years, it was a deeply Catholic pilgrimage to see the bones of Santiago in the church. And now it's a lovely ecumenical journey that people of all persuasions and no persuasions at all from all over the world are walking together. It's a postmodern ecumenical pilgrimage. And the part that we call the Camino de Santiago is just the last stage, actually, which was from the mountains of the Pyrenees, from the French town of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, over the mountains and then straight west for 500 miles till you arrive in Santiago. But really, by the time you got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, you'd often walked 500 miles to get to that place, actually, along this radius of spokes that went out all over Europe. But keeping with the Irish theme, the Irish used to subvert this whole journey by sailing in from County Cork and just walking a few miles to Santiago on the northern coast. They've never followed the rules, as I can attest from my mother. And but this is about walking any pilgrim journey, whether you're going to Varanasi, whether you're going to Rajasthan, whether you're going to Kyoto, whether you're going to Ayers Rock, or if you're an Elvis fan, if you're going to Graceland. Something remarkable happened in this place and you want to be in conversation with it in a physical way. And also on a real pilgrimage, you intuitively understand that you're going to be transformed and transfigured by the very act of walking towards the place to which you want to go. And you're going to go through many trials in which you are invited through this succession of radical simplifications down to what is essential in your journey. So you can get a greater context, about what seemed like a broken promise, what seemed like a heartbreak. So this is Santiago, and it holds, it's written in a form in which all the tenses are mixed up. So past, present, and future are actually joined together in the way the tenses are joined in this poem, but also the beginning of the journey, the end, the middle, and interestingly, towards the end, the sense of the place, the origin from which you started here, before you were even born. So this is Santiago, and I'll finish with this piece, and then we'll open it up for a little conversation. Santiago, the road seen, then not seen. The road seen, then not seen. The hillside hiding, then revealing the way you should take. The road seen, then not seen. The hillside hiding, then revealing the way you should take. The road dropping away from you, as if leaving you to walk on thin air, then catching you, holding you up when you thought you would fall. The road seen, then not seen. The hillside hiding, then revealing the way you should take. The road dropping away from you, as if leaving you to walk on thin air, then catching you, holding you up when you thought you would fall. And the way forward, always in the end, the way that you came. The way forward, always in the end, the way that you came, the way that you followed, the way that carried you into your future, that brought you to this place. No matter that it sometimes had to take your promise from you. No matter that it always had to break your heart along the way. No matter that it sometimes had to take your promise from you. No matter that it always had to break your heart along the way. The sense of having walked from deep inside yourself out into the revelation. The sense of having walked from deep inside yourself out into the revelation, to have risked yourself for something that seemed to stand both inside you and far beyond you. And that called you back in the end to the only road you could follow, walking as you did in your rags of love, and speaking in the voice that by night became a prayer for safe arrival. So that one day, you realized that what you wanted had actually already happened. One day you realized that what you wanted had actually already happened, and long ago, and in the dwelling place in which you lived before you began. And that every step along the way, you had carried the heart and the mind and the promise that first set you off and then drew you on. And that you were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way. You were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way than the gilded roofs of any destination you could reach. You were more marvelous in your simple wish to find a way than the gilded roofs of any destination you could reach, as if all along you had thought the end point might be a city with golden domes and cheering crowds, and turning the corner at what you thought was the end of the road, you found just a simple reflection and a clear revelation beneath the face looking back, and beneath it, another invitation, all in one glimpse. You found just a simple reflection and a clear revelation beneath the face looking back, and beneath it, another invitation, all in one glimpse. Like a person or a place you had sought forever, like a bold field of freedom that beckoned you beyond, like another life, and the road still stretching on. Santiago. So, good place to pause at the gates of Santiago.
Shall we take some questions?
Just invite people in for a little bit of conversation.
That was amazing. Thank you very much, David, for those words and sharing your time and creativity with us. That was superb. Superb. Okay, so let's invite some brave souls forward. I see a hand already from someone I trust, so I'm going to go ahead and ask her to unmute and spotlight Hillary. Welcome, Hillary.
Hello, Hillary.
Thank you so much. What a delight. I feel filled. And this is going to seem maybe a mundane question, but I am endlessly fascinated by how people sort of structure themselves. And so I would love to know, what's your morning routine from the moment you wake up? What does that look like? What does your morning look like?
My morning routine has just been completely devastated and shattered this weekend by the arrival of 2 new puppies. So I don't feel very qualified to speak about structure at the moment. But I've had different structures at different times, Hillary. And so the structure you have as a single young man as to when you write is very different than when you're a new father. And I had to move from being an evening writer to being a morning writer during that phase, you know. And then I've had times during my different epochs where I've needed a kind of hermetic space and even a space around a hermetic space in order to write. You know? And then I've moved into other more mature, I'd say more mature necessities where I've been able to write anywhere, actually. My book, Consolations, you know, the essay series, taking single words and looking at their underlying meaning and nourishment to them, which is often quite opposite of the way we use them, actually. That book was written on the road, on mountainsides in Scotland, or in hotel lobbies in Paris, or in malls in Singapore, you know. And so I think the main thing is just to write when you can, and to write where you feel able at that particular period in your life. And it's going to be different according to every epoch and according to your responsibilities that you have. And it's a common understanding that, you know, the hard part is not writing. The hard part is sitting down to write. The hard part is opening the laptop, is getting your pen out, or making sure there's ink in the pen, or making sure the blank page is there and that you are there facing it. Yeah, that's the hard part. So just getting yourself in a literary way to the flaggy shore and cracking the door of the car in the high wind, you know. That's how you keep your creative juices alive. That's the discipline of the everyday. And there's a lovely line by William Blake, a great poet and a great engraver, you know, both a visual and a literary artist. He said, there's a moment in every day that Satan cannot find. There's a moment in every day that Satan cannot find. That's the moment you write, yeah. Or you sculpt, or you dance, or you play your instrument, you know. It's that moment, and you have to be ready for it. Of course, to William Blake, Satan was the strategic mind that's constantly trying to bully reality under the names that you've given it. Yeah. So the ability to meet the nameless and hold the conversation with what is not yet been spoken and with what you do not as yet know. That's the real discipline. Yeah, that's a real invitation. So you find that wherever you can.
Even in the morning. So we have a couple of folks who have raised their hand using the button as we shared on chat. So I'm going to prioritize those folks, but I'm going to read 2 questions from chat that perhaps, David, you can maybe just keep in the back of your mind and wiggle into whatever beautiful questions are coming. One was, Holly would love to hear more from you on your idea of going to the edge where the elements are for transformation. And Phil wants to know, he's wanted to dive into poetry for a long time. He doesn't know where to begin. And so I'm going to leave those with you for right now. I'm going to ask Juno to unmute himself and welcome him to ask his question. Juno, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you, David, for your time and your energy and your presence today. First, I just want to quickly thank you. When I was in high school, I had quite a disdain for poetry, actually. And when I went through a pretty bad burnout and what I call a spiritual bankruptcy, I had the pleasure of running into your work, kind of coinciding with my rediscovery of meditation and then later on Buddhism. And so my question relates to, you know, the suffering or the dissatisfaction many people feel towards life, even when they're in moments of success.
Yeah.
And I find that a spiritual practice or relying on ancient wisdom and exploring the arts are some of the best antidotes to that dissatisfaction. But I find a lot of people have a resistance to it for a number of reasons. What would you suggest to someone who does have resistance to spiritual or artistic explorations on how they can find a connection to the self or the no self? Thank you.
I think resistance to poetry is entirely natural because it's really inviting you to your own demise and the death of your own identity. So I do think people should absolutely keep away from poetry because it's incredibly dangerous to your identity as presently constituted, and particularly resistant solid identities. You know, we all can intuit that Donald Trump has never read a line of poetry in his life because it's too subversive to the story you tell. Yeah. And it's constantly inviting you out to this frontier identity. Yeah. So I just say, just be as resistant as possible and until the resistance breaks down, because it's a little like saying, you need to turn towards poetry. It's like saying you need to turn towards the wind or the sky or it's so evident, you know, everything is knocking on our door. In the sense, you know, of the blue sky that we've co-evolved with for hundreds of thousands and millions of years, with the leaves falling in the northern hemisphere now at this time of year. Everything is creating an outer symmetry to your internal life. Yeah. And poetry is inviting you and beckoning you in the same way. Yeah? But there's almost nothing you can do to coerce people into poetry apart from reading it in a very natural way. Yeah? And once the person is listening to it, you know, poetry, by my definition of poetry, is language against which you have no defenses. Yeah. So many people look at a page and they don't know how to read it, so they actually don't hear the voice. Yeah. But if they actually hear a line of poetry is like if you've ever been in a relationship argument or marital argument, you know, a line of poetry is where the person, one person, unfortunately, it's almost always the other person in the argument who says the truth. And you say to yourself, damn, you know, I wish I'd have said that. They said it before me, but that's the truth now. It's been said. And interestingly, the marriage is now emancipated into a new epoch. It cannot go back because the truth has been said, and neither person can retreat from that understanding. Yeah. And it was put in a way in which the other person could not do anything but hear it. Yeah. So, you know, when you're writing poetry yourself, you're also trying to create language against which your resistant, stuck self is as not understood, you know, language representing a dynamic that you have not understood yourself. Yeah. So the same invitation you would make to another person who you think is stuck is the invitation you must make to yourself, actually. You're not going to sit down in a strategic way and say, I'm going to write something that's going to change other people. Yeah. You're going to make a radical invitation to yourself, and then you're going to share that joy and that beauty of walking out from this imprisonment out into the clear air, yeah, of having said it, you know, and therefore being free, temporarily free. Yeah. And eventually, as all of these freedoms start to build up, you start to build a more enduring sense of freedom, that accompanies you minute by minute and hour by hour and day by day. And that's, you know, that's a parallel to the dynamic accompanying the ancient dynamic accompanying the understanding of what it means to be a religious pilgrim.
We are 5 minutes from the top of the hour, so let's aim for a couple of more questions here. But I'm going to I'm gonna respond to Phil. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna respond to Phil's earlier dumb question, which is in itself interesting prose. It's a great question. Where does one begin? Phil, if you can private message me your information, I have a copy of David Whyte Essentials for you. I'm going to send you that book, and there you go. There's your step into poetry. You're doomed.
Well, I'd like to address that, actually.
Please. Oh, please.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually deeply envious of people who don't know where to begin with poetry.
Oh, wow.
I would love to be a person who had never read a line of Coleridge or Wordsworth or Emily Dickinson. I'd love to be the person who discovers Emily Dickinson for the first time in their life, who finds a line. I mean, that is absolutely an incredible place to be, Philip, yeah, I would say. And all you need to do is, you don't need to lash yourself on the back and say, I need to read T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets, you know, to be a proper poetic pilgrim. No, you need one line. You can travel 1,000 miles in one line. And Emily Dickinson is a great place to start, actually, because her poems are so impactful and short and punchy and just amazing, like taking a single shot of single malt whiskey. Actually, it's just amazing. But any poet who speaks to you, just browse through until you get one line that speaks to you. Yeah. And if that one line speaks to you, there's probably more that person has written. So whatever doorway you can get in, I'd say. Yeah.
Well, you've got multiple doorways and a copy of Essentials coming your way. So there you go.
Lovely.
Natasha, please come and join us.
Thank you so much. What an amazing morning. Great way to wake up. Thank you so much, David and Mikhail as well. My question is around internal spaciousness and this relationship between spaciousness and freedom.
Yeah.
And curious if you could speak to I want to say the methodology around that, or the practice around it.
Well, it's a little strange speaking to internal spaciousness, because the way you get to internal spaciousness is by not speaking, either to the world or to yourself. Yeah. And the ability to drop into the body and the breath. Yeah. And to let the world have its own way. Speaking of the breath, you know, often if I was in a meditation retreat, a Zen sesshin, you know, which is 5 days, 7 days, 9 hours sitting a day, it would be the third day before I realized how much effort and will I was putting into something that needed no effort or will at all, which is breathing. Breathing is an autonomic system in the body. If you do nothing, you will breathe, yeah. But you don't realize how much effort and will you are putting in to overriding this autonomic system, yeah. How much effort and will you're putting into overriding the natural exchange that you were born to. And it's one of the reasons why we have rhythm in poetry. It's because it's this approach to the breath and the way the breath naturally inhabits both the body and the voice in truthful utterance. Yeah. When you're saying something to yourself, which is invitational, which is real, which is radical, which is foundational and frontier, all at the same time, yeah, there's a certain tonality to the way you inhabit your body and your breath. Yeah. So I do think that the ability to hold this spaciousness, you know, through whatever disciplines of silence you have, and that can be even just going for a walk without your cell phone. You're a completely different person without your mobile than you are with it, actually, because you want something else to knock on your door besides your notifications, or your sound notifications, visual or sound notification. You want something else knocking on your door from deep inside you. And that's a person who's able to radically let the world alone so it can speak back to you in its own voice. So that's all I'd say to that. Yeah.
We have one interesting comment relating a little bit to what you mentioned earlier, David. Now, I'm reminded as I see this question, I'm reminded of some of the work that I think the community may not be aware of. You have, and now is not the time necessarily to go into it, but it is fascinating to me. You have been invited to numerous for-profit mega corporations as an in-house poet to help them. Boeing comes to mind, to help them explore the power of language in business and in the cultural shaping of their organization. And the question that someone has posted, which sure seems like an opportunity I'd love to see you get one day, is what is the role of poetry in politics? Wow. So I'm going to put a pin in that for you right for a second, and I'm going to invite our last community member forward. Richard, thank you for your patience. You are the last question to come forward. Please join us and say hello to David.
Hello. Thank you, David, for your wonderful words. I'm a slam poet myself. I specialize in spoken word.
Yes.
And so I'm interested in the distinction as you write and as you work, if there's a difference between writing for the page or the stage. And, you know, as we saw you speak your poetry. So is there a difference, a distinction from that, either content and language wise, or by agenda or you know, politic or that sort of thing? That I'm interested in.
Yes.
In that.
Yeah.
I also would like to ask about how you would review the poem within the performance and go back on the phrasing and add insight and reference to that. I found that very cool. Anyway.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard. Well, you're reminding me of a story of a friend of mine who met a fella in a Dublin pub, and the fella asked him what he did for a living. Well, for a start, that's a dangerous question in Ireland. You should never answer that because you're bound to get humiliated. But he said, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a writer. And the fella said, he said, a failed talker, which I do think, you know, the written word is just the spoken word captured in black and white on the page, you know. And particularly in poetry, you're writing in such a way as to capture the physical breath and rhythm of what has been said. Yeah, and you could say it's just written down so that you can go over it again. You know, I was repeating lines. I'm sure some of you said, "Oh, I wish he'd repeated that one again and not that one." You know, because we're all at different places in our life. So having it written down is just useful so that we can actually read it again. I mean, if you look at the way you read a poem on a page, unless you're very, very familiar with the poem already, you never go from top to bottom. You always circle. And if it's good poetry, you say, my God, what was that? I didn't get that's amazing. Yeah. Which is why a lot of poetry readings are really deeply disturbing to people, because you hear something that has affected you at a very, very powerful level, and you've had absolutely no time to take it in. They're already on to the next thing, you know. They've given you no space. They've given you no repetition. Yeah. And so actually it can feel like an injury to the soul to sit there and listen to truth after truth that you have no way of integrating it. Yeah. So it's interesting that in the Greek theater, whenever the gods intervened on stage, it was always repeated by the chorus, because it was understood that you could not understand the revelation the first time. It would always have to be said again, and in 3 different ways, probably. Yeah. And this is a very powerful, I mean, it can just become a wooden routine, you know, of saying things 3 different ways. But done properly, it actually allows you spontaneously to go deeper each time you rephrase it and say it again and speak to what is beckoning you below the surface level of what you first were addressing, or what you first thought you were addressing. Yeah. So I just did it there. It's just a spontaneous 3 different ways of saying it each time, trying to go a little deeper. So in slam poetry, I'd say it's the same thing. You're on stage, so there's nothing wrong with a chorus. There's nothing wrong with, I mean, silence would probably be even more radical for a slam poet than any other poet. If you suddenly stopped, you know, let people take it in, people might go, whoa, you know, said it again, then take people on. Yeah. So that's my 2 penneth worth on that. Yeah.